Members using devices must mute and turn off the sound to avoid feedback. Consider turning off the video if you intend to use the keyboard for taking notes. By the way, you can thank this committee for all these special directions that we're getting in. For good sound quality, it is important for members to speak clearly with some volume. Soft voices may be heard but are hard to understand, or there's been some feedback from the public and members that their soft speakers are hard to hear. The microphones here in the room pick up sound very well, so be careful about side conversations, and this computer will be muted at any breaks. And please remind me to unmute if we are muted before we start voting. Representative Perosian has now been designated our official muter unmute. So if you're talking and he doesn't like what you're saying and he has the mute button, that's the pre-registration information for the entire day is printed out 30 minutes prior to the first hearing. And if you miss this deadline, you must still register online, or your name will not be called. Once all pre-registered speakers have been touched, or ask that you raise your hand and you'll be recognized to speak. Those are announcements particular to this meeting. As to this meeting being held remotely, Chair, I find that due to the state of emergency declared by the governor as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, and in accordance with House Rule 67 and Governor's Emergency Rule Number 12, pursuant to the Executive Order 2020, this body is authorized to meet electronically. The public hearing on bills referred to the committee and scheduled in the House calendar for today. An executive session may be held on any bills referred to the committee. Please note that there is no physical location for members of the public to observe and listen contemporaneously to this meeting. However, in accordance with the emergency order, I am confirming that all members of the committee and select legislative staff have the ability to communicate contemporaneously during this meeting through the Zoom electronic meeting platform, and the public has access to contemporaneously listen and, if necessary, participate in this meeting on the Zoom platform. All necessary access information has been made available in the House calendar, including electronic calendar on the general website. The notice for this meeting complies with House Rules and RSA 91A, and anyone who has a problem in accessing the meeting should call 271-3600 or email hcs@state.nh. Edge.state.nh.us. In the event the public is unable to access this meeting, the meeting will be adjourned and rescheduled. Please note that all votes are taken during the meeting to be done by a roll call vote, and we're going to start by taking roll call attendance when each member states their presence. Please also state whether there is anyone in the room with you during this meeting, which is required under the right to know. I've asked that she call.
Representative Bergeron.
I am present. I'm calling in from home, and there is no one in the room with me at the present time.
Representative Barry.
Present.
Representative Cody. Representative Cody. Representative Freitas.
He's there. Oh, Representative Cody, you need to unmute to say you're with us.
I thought it was, Madam Chair. I'm sorry. I'm here and I'm alone.
Thank you.
Representative Freitas.
Good morning. I am here. I am alone in my home and I just unmuted in time. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm here.
Representative Rome.
Here.
Representative Hamlet.
Hi, I'm here and my son is here in another room. I'm at home.
Representative Hammer.
Hi, I'm here at my home and I'm alone.
Thank you. Representative Hayward. Representative Hayward.
Representative Hayward, I saw you online. Are you muted?
He is muted.
Representative Hayward, if you could unmute.
I'm here alone.
Representative Lane. Representative Lane.
I'm sorry, I'm having trouble hearing you, Madam Chair. It's a little garbled.
Hold on, Representative Lane, we've got the microphone over here. Let me move it and see if that's any.
And Representative Griffin, just so you know, Scott Kelly is coming down because I had the same sense. I wasn't positive what was going on, so he's going to come check it out in a sec.
Okay.
I am here in my home. I am alone in my office at home.
Representative McDonald.
Here.
Representative Mooney.
Here.
Representative Muirhead.
Present and alone.
Representative O'Brien.
Present.
Representative Twaley.
Here.
Representative Sandler.
I'm here and I'm alone.
Representative Sweeney. Representative Trojan.
Here.
Representative Ward.
Here at home with 2 family members in the house.
Thank you. And before we take testimony from our first sponsor, I would like to do the pledge as we have done in the election law committee. You can join me. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, hopefully you can hear everybody and see everybody that we need to see. Our first bill this morning is House Bill 97, modifying the dates of the state primary and associated filing deadlines. With us this morning to introduce the bill is sponsored Representative Boehm. Representative Boehm, are you with us?
Yes, and thank you, Madam Chair and members of the Election Law Committee, which was my first committee in 2005 and 2006. So anyway, I'm Ralph Boehm, Hillsborough District 20 in the town of Litchfield. We, along with Rhode Island, have the last primary date in the country. Depending on the calendar, we are desperately close to the federal limit as of the number of days before the general election. Luckily, in the past few elections, we have not needed the recount. If so, we would have had a problem. Moving it up a month will give more time for absentee ballots to be utilized, especially for the military. Even the 45-day deadline for absentee ballots makes it difficult for military members overseas who request a ballot from their town and then mail it back in time. A quick count shows that 16 other places have their primary in August. And currently we have a longer primary than general election. Moving up earlier than that will cause problems. For example, to June will make a 5-month election cycle. This will only make elections more expensive for candidates and make it easy for only the rich to win. Of course, the U.S. Postal Service and print shops will make more money as other media, and that will cause moving the filing date to March, forces candidates to have a total of an 8-month election cycle. And with the redistricting happening this year, will definitely cause a problem. From past experiences, seriously doubt it will be finished earlier than May. And just heard census data will be late. Also note, town elections are in March and April. People need a break from elections. Starts from town elections in January, then state and federal, January to November. We will have signs up along the roads all year. So with that, thank you, and I'll answer any questions.
Thank you. Do members of the committee present in the room have any questions? Representative McDonald.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Representative Boehm, I was just curious. August obviously is one of the heavy summer months. Are you concerned about turnout or participation as a result of a primary in August?
No, not really. I think it'd be better. Right now, we have a problem within September. It's right after Labor Day and school starting. In June, if we move it to June, we also have a big problem because of schools getting out and colleges, people getting ready to go to college and making the trips and whatnot. So I think August, like I said, 16 other states have their primary in August, and it doesn't be a problem. And with absentee ballots of people going on vacation, and whatnot, they can request an absentee ballot.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other committee members, Representative Fernando Bryant.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Do you think this will help college students who are making plans to move from where their home is to the dormitories? To help them to vote in our state primary election?
Well, if they're not in the state and they're not residents of the state at the time of the primary, which would be any time like during the summer, yeah, they wouldn't be able to vote.
Further questions from committee members? Does any committee member participating online have a question? I'm not seeing anybody raise their hand online. Representative Berry, do you have a question?
Yes, you mentioned that moving the primary date into June would raise the cost of the election for candidates. How does that raise the cost?
I can't hear that.
You said in your testimony that moving the primary date to June would raise the cost for candidates. I'm curious how that would raise their costs.
Yeah, I think it would increase the cost for anybody running for a 5-month cycle. I mean, we're constantly we will be bombarded, and finally people will stop even listening. Also, the big problem I see this year is moving it. The filing date would probably then have to be in March. We won't have redistricting done before that. And I've been involved with happening two redistricting, and it's not going to happen by May. I mean, before May. And I remember 20 years ago, it didn't happen until toward the end of June. So redistricting, I think, is a major concern you're going to have to look at, because it's not going to happen before May. I can guarantee you that.
Other questions?
My speaker is muted on my computer.
Has it stopped now? That microphone apparently went off.
I laptop, Griffin.
What's the laptop?
It was the laptop, I believe, that was creating the feedback. Yes.
And it showed my microphone was off the whole time. So I think if we have a break, I'm going to ask IT to come to look, because I'm having a little problem with my controls. All right. Thank you. Other questions from committee members? I'm not seeing any. Thank you very much for your participation this morning.
Thank you.
Also signed up to speak on this bill is Lynn Blankenbecker, and I am having a problem promoting her, which is why when we have somebody down, if they could come on a break to take a look at what's going on here. Representative McDonald, can you promote her, please? Or Pam?
I just did it, Representative Griffin.
Thank you. Ms. Blankenbecker, welcome to the Election Law Committee. Good morning.
Good morning, Madam Chair, and good morning, members of the Election Law Committee. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to speak today on behalf of this bill. I am in support of this bill. I did provide an advance written testimony, so I hope that you guys were able to see that, but I'll launch right in. I have been a member of the military for 35 years, and I've been a proud resident of New Hampshire since 1993, and I have been deployed many, many times and recalled back to active duty. And every single time I've been deployed or recalled back to active duty, I've had to ask for an absentee ballot during elections because I am a resident of New Hampshire, but I'm living in other states or abroad. And so I'm very accustomed to taking the absentee ballot. I have been asking for this very bill for many, many years, over a decade, because I do feel like that as military members, we are disenfranchised when it comes to voting. These short windows between primary and general election days, even though it fits within that 45-day federal law, we're really at 56 days. And so if the Postal Service is slow, or if the clerk's office is slow getting the ballots out, or in my very own case, one time I had to have a recount, and so that delayed preparing the general ballot when there was a recount. And so when there are those delays, then the ballots don't get to us in time. And you can imagine being in a war zone, and we've been in a protracted war now for over 17 years over in the Middle East. Mail isn't always a priority. If there's other things that they have to get there for us to be able to fight a war, the mail is not going to be the priority. And so there can be delays in getting our ballots to us. And so a bill such as this that would back up the primary date so that the different, the general ballots can be prepared and they can be sent out a little bit sooner will absolutely help folks like us who are deployed or out of the state to deal with delays in the Postal Service and get our ballots to us. And I'll just share one little quick war story. For those of you who don't know, I served aboard USNS Comfort last March in support of COVID relief. And our ship was docked in New York City. And on April 1st, my daughter sent me a little care package. It just had some Easter chocolate in it from her home in Texas to New York City. You would think that would get there very easily. The post office guaranteed delivery before Easter, which fell on April 12th. The package was returned to her in September. That was a 5-month delay in the Postal Service getting a box of chocolate here within the United States. So we can see that there are delays in the Postal Service. And I think any length of time, and certainly this additional month, would greatly serve our military. And I don't want to, blow our own horn here, but military members are the ones who protect and defend the Constitution for all of us abroad. And voting is one of our fundamental rights, and we want to be engaged and active citizens, even when we are far away from our communities. And this is a great way for you guys to honor our service and ensure that our vote matters. So I'm happy to take any questions, but thank you very much for the opportunity to share my concerns and my support of this bill.
Thank you. Questions from committee members present in the room? I'm seeing none. Questions from committee members attending online? Hold on, well. If I can just interrupt, could people hear Representative Berry when he was speaking? Because the microphones are placed in different positions today. While we have somebody here, if you have problems hearing Representative Berry, could you let me know? Well, we can hear him because we're in the room. I'm questioning since the microphone last week was down there and now it's up here. I just want to make sure people can hear. It looks like people could. Just to be your Representative Terozzi, and you want to move that microphone, that fire thing, just to the corner of the table. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I do have a question for you. The bill that you're speaking on today proposes that it be moved to a Tuesday in August. We have some other bills that we're hearing today that are proposing June, September, other dates. I understand that you're in favor of moving the primary date. Do you have an opinion as to what date it should or should be?
Not necessarily. I think that, obviously the September date is very tight because that only gives us about 56 days between which is where we currently are, is in September. I think August definitely gives another opportunity, especially in the, if there is a recount and there might be a further delay. It seems to be successful in other states. It's hard to say, if backing it up to June would make, more of a difference, obviously, we just want more time. So at least me, and I should say right away that I'm not speaking on behalf of the Department of Defense or the United States Navy. This is purely testimony of Lynn Blankenbecker, not, not the United States Navy. Any extra time you can give us would be great. And I really don't have an opinion on the merits of a June date or a April date or a further date. I haven't done an analysis to determine whether or not that would be more cost effective, or I just know for me personally, being in the military, that any extra time you could give us would be great.
Thank you. Any further questions? I'm not seeing any. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. Also signed up to speak on this bill, I have Tony LaBranch. If Tony LaBranch is in attendance, if he or she could please raise her hand. I don't see you on the attendee list. All right, and if anybody knows Mr. LaBranch, if perhaps you could ask him to contact me, remember to contact me, because I recall that he or she was signed up last week for one or two bills and was not in attendance, and if he wants to participate, I want to make sure that you're in the follows. Is there anybody else who would like to speak on this bill? I note that Deputy Scanlon is participating in the election law hearing this morning. Does the Secretary of State's office want to offer any testimony on this bill this morning? Not seeing any.
He has raised his hand, Madam Chairman, Deputy Scanlon. Oh,
all right.
Now he lowered his hand.
I think he's a participant though, so if he wants to, he should be. No, it's back up.
His hand is back up. Would you like me to promote him?
Hold on, this is where I'm having a little problem. All right, thank you. Deputy Scanlon, if you want to speak, please join us.
He's on his way.
Oh, you on your way.
Here, can you hear me, Madam Chair?
Good morning.
Yeah, I'm having some audio issues. It might be on your end. I don't know if other people listening in are having trouble hearing you, Madam Chair. I can hear the people testifying just fine, and I can hear Pam Smarling just fine. But you're coming across very difficult to hear.
Many people applauding, but I just turned on a microphone that had been turned off. Is that better?
That's much better.
Here you go. Thank you for attention.
Yep, thank you. Madam Chair, I was planning on just testifying on the bill that Natalie Wells, Representative Wells, has sponsored on our behalf, but it might be helpful for the committee to know that the September primary has been in place since 1910, and the primary since then has always been held in the month of September. We have had no problem getting absentee ballots out to the voters in time for them to be able to vote in the general election. There's a federal statute that requires that ballots be sent to military and overseas voters no later than 45 days before the election, provided the request has been made of that voter. That statute also goes on to say that in the case of military voters, we have to be able to email ballots to them. In other words, deliver the ballot to the voter electronically, which we do, and we meet the 45-day deadline with very few exceptions, and then it's up to the voter to download the ballot, mark it, and then return it to the city or town clerk in the town or city that they live in. In the past, the Department of Defense has been incredibly helpful, especially when we're in a wartime situation and we have many troops overseas that are serving the country, they step up and have collected ballots in the past and returned them to the states and made sure that the delivery through the Postal Service was expedited. This past election cycle has been an exception where the post office has just had very difficult time delivering mail, period, in a timely manner. And that seems to be an internal problem with the post office, whether it's a funding issue or whether it's an absentee issue because of COVID. I think we all recognize that the mail service today is not what it was even 2 or 3 years ago. So that is an issue that needs to be dealt with. In terms of this specific bill and an August date for a primary, the one concern that we would have is that families are generally in vacation mode. A lot of people are taking time off from work, and states that have moved their primaries into the month of August have had their turnout drop in general terms. And I think Vermont is a good example. They're experimenting with moving the date of their primary earlier than it had been. They moved it to the last week in August a few years ago. Then they moved it earlier into August, and I'm not quite sure where they stand at the moment, but trying to figure out what the perfect date of holding their primary is, at least to the state of Vermont, seems to be a moving target. So with that, Madam Chair, I would be happy to answer any questions.
Does anyone have any questions for Deputy Scanlon? Representative Terosian.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you. So if I heard you correctly, whether the primary date was in September or August, it would still be the same 45-day window. Particularly military folks to get their ballot back in.
Madam Chair, I had great difficulty hearing the question. I don't know if somebody could repeat it.
Peter, Representative Terosian, might try again.
Yeah, I'll try speaking a little louder. Can you hear me better now?
That's better, yes.
So my question is whether or not the primary is in September or August, would it still be the same 45-day window absentee ballot people to get their ballots, in particular the military?
The federal requirement is 45 days. I don't think that there is anything to prevent us from sending the absentee ballots out to military and overseas voters if they are ready before that.
My follow-up question is, do we have a statistic to know right now what kind of rate of return we get back from military folks that are absent? What percentage of those ballots come back?
Representative Terosian, I don't have the answer to that at the moment, but let me call the people that work in our HAVA office, the Help America Vote Act office that handles those ballots, and I'll see if I can get that number for you.
Thank you.
Today.
Thank you. Other members, Representative Barry.
Thank you, Secretary Scanlon. It's good to be able to be here. You said in your testimony that turnout, you cited that other states that have moved their primaries back, see a decrease in turnout. When you conducted that study or the state you're referencing, did it consider the competitiveness of the primaries in the state, or did it just look at it as a binary result? What I'm getting at is this correlation is not necessarily causation.
Representative Barry, again, I had great difficulty understanding the question.
Is that better, Secretary?
Well, without the extra background noise, that's much better.
That'll be fast.
All right. So, Secretary, can you hear me?
I can hear you, but I'm straining.
How about now?
Representative, take that mic that's in front of you.
You couldn't hear Terosian.
Well, I'm going to move that mic. Take that mic to in front of you.
Secretary, can you hear me now?
I think that might, maybe that mic isn't working.
I don't think it is.
Yeah, go ahead.
Mr. Secretary, can you hear me now?
Yes, that's better.
So I have a question about the study that you cited about the primary date moving back. Did that study include competitiveness of the primaries in terms of turnout? And what I'm getting at is, if there's not a competitive primary, less people are voting. So correlation is not necessarily causation. And I'm wondering if the study that you cited incorporated that.
Representative Barry, I don't have a specific study. It's more anecdotal observation.
Thank you. Committee members with questions. Representative Prudhomme O'Brien.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will try to speak clearly and loudly for you.
Representative Prudhomme O'Brien, I can hear you just fine.
Okay. Are you aware of other states with an August primary? And can you tell us a little bit about the voter turnout rates in those states? And I have a follow-up. Thank you.
Well, yes, I mean, there are states that have August primaries. Vermont is probably the closest example of that. And, you know, what I should do is compile some of the data that you're requesting in terms of, you know, the voter turnout in those states compared to New Hampshire. And I'll make an effort to do that very, very quickly.
Thank you. Follow-up. Thank you. This would be an anecdotal situation, but I'm curious if you're aware of any service member who has been disenfranchised because of this September primary, that they missed deadlines by just a few days. Have you ever heard of such a thing?
Yes, I mean, I think that probably happens in every election where we receive military and overseas ballots after the election. That also happens in the general population where we receive ballots, absentee ballots after the fact. And we do know that there are servicemen and women that serve in very remote locations, you know, in duty and service to the country. And those voters do have a very difficult time getting their ballots back in time to be counted.
Thank you. Representative Rowan.
Deputy Secretary, do you move the primary up? Do you have having it in August or June?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question.
Yeah, let me repeat the question if you can hear me.
I can hear you.
You had a preference as to the actual date as to between August and June, and you're asking him that, keeping in mind that the office didn't ask for either of those dates, I presume. Deputy.
I think both of those dates have different challenges. I think the moving the date into early August is going to be competing with family vacations and summertime activities, which may diminish turnout. Moving it to June is a little bit different because the filing period would be taking place right in the middle of a legislative session. You know, it would probably be sometime in March. I think that's the date that's in the legislation. And we're kind of starting to talk about the next bill now. But, you know, the New Hampshire elects an entirely new state government every 2 years. And so if there's a filing in March after, I mean, you're elected in November, you take your seats in December, and then a little over a year later, the filing period is beginning for the next election. I mean, you tell me whether you think that's, you know, that's a good idea or not. I mean, I think that you could have a pretty good debate on that, where, you know, you're in full election mode before halfway through the legislative session is over in the second year of the biennium.
Representative Prudhomme O'Brien.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have another more specific question regarding service members overseas from New Hampshire trying to vote in the primary elections here. Have you ever heard of a situation where email was not available to those service members, where they were unable to obtain a ballot that was emailed to them because of the area that they're in, and thus they were unable to vote? Has that ever happened, to your knowledge?
I cannot cite a specific example of that happening, but just understanding where some service members are deployed, that I think it's very likely that that has happened, that a member of our military is in such a remote location, and performing whatever the duty is that that may be highly classified or whatever, that it is probably virtually impossible for them to receive a ballot and return it in time.
Further questions from committee members? I'm seeing none. Thank you, Deputy. Is there any other member of the public that would like to speak in regards to this? Ms. Bleckenbecker, I see that you have your hand raised, and if you unmute, you should be able to join us. Thank you.
Thank you so much for an opportunity to speak again. I just wanted to underscore that when we're in an austere environment, we have limited to no connectivity. And sometimes you do have internet for a little bit, and you can request, say, an email ballot. But then, like my situation when I was in Afghanistan, we had rocket attacks all the time. And when a rocket came in, it took our internet out, and it could take weeks to get our internet back. And so relying on an internet ballot for people in the military in an austere environment really is not an option for us. And I don't think that that should play into the mix here, relying on that. We do all have voter assistance teams for us in the military, at least in the Navy we do. And so they do a really good job trying to help us to be able to vote. And so I appreciate all the efforts that folks have made to help us vote. But this extended time would help us get through those postal system lags. And, I can speak for myself. I ordered a ballot when I was overseas, and I never even got it. So I was denied my right to vote, even though I ordered the ballot. And so I am one of those people that can speak to that, which is why this has become so passionate for me and why I've been asking for decades for this process to change. I also would suggest that I know there are 16 states that have an August time primary, but there are other states that have much earlier primaries, and that's wildly successful for other states. And so with only 2 states having a late primary, us and Rhode Island, but yet 48 other states have a longer opportunity to between the primary and the general. I think that probably is very telling that other states have found this to be wildly successful, and certainly successful for those of us in the military. So I hope that that can get added into my testimony, although it wasn't in my written testimony. Thank you.
Thank you. Elizabeth Roth has her hand raised. Ms. Roth, if you'd like to speak, you have been joined into the panelists, and if you unmute, welcome.
Thank you. I'm trying to start my video also. I'm just looking through this, and I've been reading it off and on over the last week when it was brought to my attention by a friend of mine who I had worked with in 2016 to get a third-party presidential candidate on our ballot in New Hampshire. And so am I understanding this correctly, that this would shorten the time that activists or citizens would be allowed to petition to get a third-party candidate on our ballots?
It does mean that the primary dates in regards to candidate filings would be, to get on the ballot, would be moved up, I would presume. Scanlon, would you like to speak to that?
Yes, Madam Chair, that is a very good point. At the moment, third-party candidates or third-party organizations that are trying to obtain ballot status have the year of the election to collect their signatures. And the deadline for turning those signatures in to achieve that party status is, it's around the date of our September primary. So if the date of the primary were to change, there would have to be a corresponding provision in statute to address the filings that are required by third parties.
I just wanted to make sure that it wasn't going to shorten the time period. I mean, I don't foresee myself working to help a third party candidate in the future. However, I am a supporter of a vibrant democracy. And in New Hampshire, we have this wonderful, vibrant New Hampshire primary. I've always wondered why it wasn't more open supportive for third-party candidates to participate. And that's really the only comment, but thank you for taking my testimony.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who wanted to speak in regards to this matter?
Madam Chairman, I see Representative Lane's hand is up.
Thank you. Representative.
Yes, I had a question for Deputy Secretary of State Scanlon. Did I understand you to say that you email the ballots to the folks across in the service?
Madam Chair, Representative Lane, that's correct. That's a federal requirement.
Okay.
That states have to deliver the email. They have to deliver absentee ballots to our military and overseas personnel no later than 45 days before the election. And it is a requirement that that we have an opportunity to email those ballots to our military personnel if they request that. They have the option of either requesting just a regular ballot or having their ballot emailed to them.
Could I have a follow-up, please? Madam Chair, may I have a follow-up, please?
Sorry, I said follow up. I'm having problems today. Go ahead.
Okay. Sorry, it's very hard to hear you still. So do they have to then print the ballot and mail it back to you, or do they send it back to you by email?
They have to print the ballot on whatever printer they have, fill it out, and then mail it back.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else here to testify on HB 97? I'm not seeing anyone. Our next hearing is on this bill regards to moving the primary to the first Tuesday in June. Representative Alexander is with us today, and I cannot promote him to a panelist. So Pam or Wayne, if you could do that, that would be helpful. And Representative Alexander is with us. Welcome. If you could unmute Representative.
Yep, I'm here. I was just joined in the meeting. Thank you, Madam Chair, my fellow Goffstown representative that I voted for. For the record, my name is Representative Joe Alexander. I represent the town of Goffstown, Hillsborough District 6. HB 98 is relative to the date of the state primary election, much like the last bill. So this would move the primary to June. I believe that this bill is bipartisan bill that makes the process more democratic. 413 days passed from the beginning of the GOP US primary in 2020. And between the September 8th primary and the November 3rd general election was just 56 days. To have such a drastic difference between the time spent on elections deprives general election voters of a fully fleshed out and nuanced campaign. Primary voters and general election voters are different universes of voters, and to give our candidates only roughly 7 weeks to speak to a general election after spending more than a year on their primary inflates the role of the primary voter in the process and diminishes the role of the average general election voter. By moving the primary to the second Tuesday in June, we'll give both will give voters on both sides, Republican and Democrat, plenty of time to debate the issues and discuss their primary elections before, while also giving general election voters more time to debate the candidates before the state. When holding elections, we should give voters the most time and research to study the candidates and the differences between them. Having a late primary could possibly have a recount, and that would give only 6 weeks for the nominees to fight for the general election win. So like the last hearing, New Hampshire has the second latest primary in the nation, state primary, and our voters proved time and time again that they pay attention. Some have speculated that Granite Staters wouldn't pay attention to a primary election held further away from the general. That argument falls apart when we recognize that we are the first in the nation, and we have some of the highest participation in the nation. So long story short, I think this bill is needed. I think it makes the process more democratic, and I'd be happy to take any questions.
Any questions from committee members in the room? Questions from committee members attending electronically?
Yes.
Representative Bergeron.
Thank you. Thank you. Representative, just a question. It was brought up earlier by one of another question for the other bill. If a third party wants to get on the ballot, it has to pull nomination papers during the calendar year in which the election is being held. And those nomination papers have to be submitted, I believe it's 1 week before the date of the primary election. So in effect, your bill would shorten the opportunity for third party candidates or independents to get on the ballot. They only have less than 5 months to collect signatures now instead of perhaps the 9 months that they currently have. Do you think that window would need to be changed as well to ensure that they have the same amount of time to get on the ballot as they currently have?
Thank you, Representative, for the question. I personally do not see a problem with the 5-month window. I think it provides plenty of time for those third party candidates to get on the ballot.
All right, thank you.
Further questions from committee members attending in person or online? I'm not seeing any. Thank you, Representative Alexander, for your testimony.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Also signed up to speak in regards to this bill is Ken McLean. I did see that he was in attendance, and I once again am having problems promoting him. If somebody could promote him to a panelist, that would be terrific.
Would you like to do that, Representative McDonald?
Yeah. You should be promoted at this point. Mr. McLean, can you hear us?
Mr. McLean appears to still be at attendee. Pam, could you do it?
Sure.
Thank you.
Oops.
Mr. McLean, you are with us here this morning. Welcome. If you unmute yourself, we'd be welcome your testimony on HB 98. Good morning.
Good morning. Morning, Madam Chair and committee members. My name is Ken McLean. I live in Derry, New Hampshire. Obviously, New Hampshire. I do fully support HB 98. I believe that changing the primary day to a sooner date is long overdue here in New Hampshire. It is vitally important for the general public to compare and contrast candidates, and equally important for voter information and voter confidence. This will also facilitate voters to have more time to be engaged in issues and views of the candidates for the general election. Having the primary in the first week of June allows the winners to have the summer months to share themselves with the voters during cookouts, parades, home days, fairs, and other warm weather activities, including the 4th of July. Other considerations for this change are national committees' endorsements, having to wait until September for candidates to have access to national funding for the general election. An earlier primary allows for better distribution of funds available alongside other states. An earlier primary allows for greater unity in each party for a particular candidate after a contested primary, adding strength to the message of the primary winner. As it stands now, the primary winner has approximately only 7 weeks to organize for the general election for advertising, campaigning, and debating, which is extremely limited time for voter access. An earlier primary will, for all intents and purposes, eliminate the need to have candidates sign a pledge to support unity after the primary, as time will be permitted after a contested primary for sides to heal. I personally have been involved in several campaigns for local and national office in several states, and by comparison, I have firsthand knowledge and experience that the earlier the primary, the better voter involvement. An earlier primary allows the voter to feel empowered with a sense of belonging and responsibility of the issues concerning them, as time has afforded them to learn the details, work them out,
Thank you, Mr. McLean. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. McLean? Anybody in the room? Representative Prudhoe O'Brien.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Hello, Mr. McLean. It's always great to hear from people from Derry. Thank you very much for joining us. As a candidate, I always appreciate the summer activities going on in the area and being able to campaign in that way, such as at the 4th of July events. How would you feel about the primary being held in August? Do you feel that that satisfies many of your concerns as well?
Representative McLean, you should still be with us if you'd like to speak. Well, maybe I'm not seeing Mr. McLean anymore. Thank you for his testimony. It would appear he is not in the meeting anymore. The next person who has signed up for this meeting today is Mr. Lacreta, Joseph Lacreta. Are you with us? You are. If you unmute.
Oh, can you hear me?
Welcome. Good morning.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Thank you so much. My name is Joseph Lacreta. I am a resident of Merrimack, New Hampshire, and here's my testimony in favor of the House Bill 98. I fully support and back the House Bill 98 bill. As a young college student, I aspire to be involved in the political process here in New Hampshire. As I grow and learn more about the political process here in New Hampshire, I have realized that a change needs to be made with respect to the primary date. We need a date that would work with the voters and encourage voter engagement, more specifically, youth voter engagement. During my time in college thus far, I have noticed a significant lack in youth participation in our local, state, and federal election process. A great many youths lack appreciation for the primary process and unfortunately only become focused for the general election as the primary is long, arduous, and crowded. I strongly encourage our state leaders to move our primary day from September to the first Tuesday in June. By doing so, we'll afford young voters in New Hampshire the entire summer season to learn and evaluate 2 candidates and will be more inclined to attend various events while at the same time enjoying the nice summer weather. Young voters are not inclined to endure the gobs of information about the candidates' positions during a summer primary season, but rather prefer a spirited contest between 2 candidates from both sides of the aisle. I think of our political process as a sports playoff, but having real life consequences. The primary is the divisional playoffs, and the general election is the finals. In the sports world, more people pay attention to the final, with more media coverage and opinion about the participants. The political demeanor between the primary and the general will entice more youth involvement, and we will be much more inclined to tune into that final between the 2 teams. Sounds exciting, right? Well, this is how we will excite and engage young folks, empowering us so that we can have an impact and a sense of belonging. I know for a fact that our elected officials prefer more young people to be politically involved and to appreciate the democratic republic system that we have. Therefore, the youth in New Hampshire would be more inclined to become better educated in politics and even be inspired to be a part of the next generation of leaders. By moving the primary, I believe that it will have a positive and lasting impact on Granite State youth for generations to come. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions for witness in regards to House Bill 98 relative to the state primary? Representative Terosian.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for taking my question. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. So, I heard you want to vet the candidate in the general election. You also think it's important to vet the candidates during the primary portion of the election as well, and you send events to get to know and see the policy ideas that candidates have in the primary election as well.
I'm sorry, I cut out a little bit. Can you speak a little louder?
Okay, in your testimony, you mentioned, the different aspects of the election. And my question was, in the primary, do you also think it's important to get to know the candidates and see what their policy concerns are and ideas are? Or are you only concerned once it gets to the general portion of the election?
Well, I'm involved in the political process through and through, but I think for more youth who are the average voter, I think they would be more inclined to not engage when there's like a primary with a ton of candidates, because to them it would just be confusing. But just having two candidates, like one Republican, one Democrat, they have two options right in front of them and they know the names and they can just get to know them more on their issues rather than just having all the kind of the noise of the background of the primary, and they just kind of be more focused on themselves in a sense. So just really simplifying it and just having two candidates throughout the whole entire summer while they have school off, they would more likely pay attention to the election.
Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Sweeney.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Lacretta, for your testimony today. Do you think, or would you believe, if the primary were to be held in June of the election year, that would give political organizations on campuses in New Hampshire more opportunities to hold election-related events in the spring semester of the year, instead of really just having primary and general election events on campus in the fall semester? Do you think that possibility for an earlier primary and more activities on campuses in that spring semester could drive more involvement on campuses when students would otherwise not be paying attention?
Yeah, I certainly think so. I mean, as we move out of winter and get into the spring months, more people are outside. They're walking around, playing games on the campus yard. And we usually table for our political organizations outside. And when we do, people walk by and they usually stop by and wonder what's going on. And if they, wonder what's going on in politics, we would tell them, hey, there'll be a primary in June, the weather's getting warmer and you can look at all these candidates. And then after that, you have the whole entire summer to think about just two, So we just really kind of use the warm weather to get people kind of excited about it. Because during the summer we work a lot. So when we have just two candidates rather than like a million, be simpler for us to really hone down on the issues.
Thank you. Other questions from committee members? I'm not seeing any questions. Thank you very much for your testimony here this morning. Also to speak this morning on this bill is William Burke. William Burke is in attendance, and I am trying to promote you to be a panelist, but my little screen is going round and around. I think you are with us now, and if you unmute, Mr. Burke, you can be with us. Mr. Burke, can you hear me? Pam, if you're with us, can you check to see if he is indeed with us and unmute him?
I cannot unmute him, but I have asked him electronically to unmute. He should be getting a prompt on his screen to do that. He is a panelist. But why he can't unmute, I can't tell you.
Okay. While we're waiting for Mr. Burke, I see that Elizabeth Rock has her hand up to speak on this bill. Ms. Rock, I am hopeful that if you unmute, you will speak on this bill. Well,
Thank you for taking my testimony. Elizabeth Rupp, I'm in Manchester, and I just wanted to thank Representative Bergeron for redirecting my question on that I brought up in HB 97 to HB 98, where it needed.
Ms. Rock, we're having technical difficulties this morning with hearing you. I think you might actually have a bad connection.
I think she's frozen.
She's frozen, and maybe if she were to sign off and sign back into the meeting, it might help clear up her technical difficulties. That's the only suggestion I have. Oh, she seems to be moving again.
Ms. Rock, we're having difficulty with your connection. If you could sign off and sign back in, it might be better for us to get the connection, and we'll be sure to recognize you. You're frozen again with us. Thank you. Has Mr. Burke unmuted? He has not.
He has not. I've asked him repeatedly, through the Zoom feature. Oh, there he is. He's back.
Madam Chair, thank you for your patience and for your courtesy in this matter. Is another person speaking? Am I interrupting someone?
Welcome. Go ahead, Mr. Burke.
Good morning, honorable members of the House Committee on Election Law. I am addressing HB 98. I respectfully oppose HB 98 as presently written and suggest it be deemed inexpedient to legislate without further amendment. HB 98 proposes an amendment to Chapter 655. It interacts with two other sections of Chapter 655, as presently written, to conflict with the rights of those other candidates who intend to have their name placed on the ballot for the state general election by means other than nomination by party primary, as contemplated by Section 655-14A. Now, Section 655-40 states, as the Deputy Secretary of State has noted, nomination papers shall be dated in the year of the election. This sets the opening day for petition as January the 1st. The second point is that Section 655-43 states in paragraph 1, nomination papers shall be filed with the Secretary of State no later than 5:00 p.m. on the Wednesday 1 week before the primary. Now it follows that by changing the date of the primary from the second Tuesday in September to the first Tuesday in June, the period of time in which such independent or alternative party candidates might petition is radically reduced to 5 months, much of which time is taken up with inclement weather, which inhibits door-to-door petitioning. I respectfully recommend that HB 98 be deemed inexpedient to legislate as written and resubmitted with revisions so as to amend Section 655-40 and 655-43 to protect the First Amendment rights of independent and alternative party candidates to participate in our general elections. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for your testimony this morning and your perseverance with us with our technical issues. Questions from the committee. Representative Sweeney.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Burke, for testifying with us today. Do you see anything in the proposed legislation of HB 98 that removes the write-in field from the ballot in the general election?
What I see is instead, as written, the bill inhibits political activity by restricting the period of time in which such independent or alternative party candidates may circulate their petitions. And as we know from our experience at the last general election cycle, where circulating petitions was inhibited by the pandemic, the state had to defend litigation from the Libertarian Party, to which ultimately was resolved by reducing the number of signatures required. But nonetheless, we have litigation there. And I do not wish the taxpayers of this state to have to pay for litigation unnecessarily. I would prefer that the bill be fixed,
I hear you.
repaired.
Representative Sweeney.
I'm not asking regarding the petitions. My question is, do you see anything in the bill as proposed that would remove the write-in field from the general election ballot?
No, I do not.
Further questions for Mr. Burke? I'm not seeing any questions. Further questions? Thank you, Mr. Burke, for testifying this morning.
Thank you for your time, ma'am. Take care now.
That concludes the people who have signed up ahead of time to speak. I have a Tina Guilford on the line who has her hand up to speak on this bill. And I'm having difficulty with the computers. First meeting, we were pretty seamless. This meeting is not so seamless. So I apologize if somebody could, looks like Tina Guilford has been promoted and unmuted. Welcome.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Chair. So I'm here today. You have multiple bills in front of you to move the primary. I think that after this last election cycle, it has become obvious that the 45-day UOCAVA window is an issue. And so moving the primary makes sense. However, this moving it to June does have a wrinkle in it that I don't know if it would affect other towns, but would definitely affect the town of Derry. So in order to file to be on the primary, in instances where you would file with the town clerk, which is the state representative race, you would need to file between the first Wednesday in March and the Friday of the following week to declare your candidacy. Most second Tuesdays in March for us are a town election. Our town clerk is closed. He's at the polls. And I know that that's the case in lots of towns. So now you're kind of cutting down the number of days that people can actually sign up. And most state reps that are currently sitting are either in committees, legislation, voting on bills. I really think signing up during March is a really bad idea. And with that, I conclude what I have to say.
Very much for your testimony and your analysis of the calendar. Representative Sweeney, was your hand up?
No.
Representative Prudhomme O'Brien.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, Ms. Guilford, for joining us. It's always great to hear from Derry residents. Do I take it that you prefer the August date of a primary to this one? Is that what you mean?
Personally, I think August is fine. We definitely need at least the first Tuesday in September. It's kind of funny where we have the first in the nation primary and the last in the nation primary, basically in a presidential cycle. We really do extend the season for everyone. And it definitely takes a lot of time as an election official.
Thank you, Representative Sweeney.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you for your testimony today. I understand your opposition to the bill based off of the filing in the first 2 weeks of March. If the bill is to be amended to make it filing in the last 2 weeks of March or the last week of March and the first week of April, would you still be opposed to a June primary date?
I believe so, because I think that doesn't leave a big enough window for people to declare their candidacy and then actually run. I think that makes the window too small.
Thank you. Further questions from committee members? Representative Berry.
Are you aware of any candidates who have campaigned before the filing day?
Yes.
Further questions? I'm not seeing any. Thank you, Ms. Guilford, for joining us today. The last hand I see up on this matter is Mr. McLean is attempting to join us again. And Mr. McLean, I appear to be able to promote you to the panel. We'll see. Maybe not. Pam or Representative McDonald, if you can help me out. There you go. Mr. McDonald, you should be joining us in a minute. And Mr. McLean, you have joined us. If you could unmute.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
And Mr. McLean, you wanted to add to your testimony from before?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I apologize for that. It just cut out on me as middle of my speech here. You want me just to continue where I left off, or how did you want me to do?
Why don't you continue where you left off? We have an excellent clerk and we have a record of what we already heard from you. Thank you for proceeding. We did wonder why you wanted to leave us so quickly.
It kicked me off for some reason. I don't really understand what the message was on there. It was some Zoom error, I guess, but I did submit this to several people, like to the chair, the vice chair, Madam Clerk, and I submitted this letter to the 3 sponsors as well.
So if you want to continue where you left, that would be great.
Okay, I'll be on the 3rd paragraph. It says, I personally have been involved in several campaigns for local and national office in several states, and by comparison, I have firsthand knowledge and experience that the earlier the primary, the better voter involvement. An earlier primary allows the voter to feel empowered with a sense of belonging and responsibility of the issues concerning them, as time has afforded them to learn the details, work them out, and to have a spirited discussion with each candidate. Candidates themselves benefit from an earlier primary as it allows them to convalesce with the citizens more often, which will lend to a candidate's appreciation for the concerns of the citizens, improving his or her attachment with them. An earlier primary allows a candidate to have more time to travel within the district to reach as many voters as possible, which allows for the citizen examination to occur to afford them more knowledge of the candidates. I think we all agree that a better knowledge of the issues a voter has makes for a better informed voter, which will allow them to be part of discussions with the candidate that ultimately wins. A later primary has proven to make voters feel rushed to fully understand any candidate's position clearly. In conclusion, my door knocking and voter engagement experiences before and after a primary have proven to me that the citizens are much more involved and knowledgeable about the issues and candidates after the primary. For too many months before our current primary day in September, the lack of focus by the general public is discernible as too many candidates and issues permeate in a process of time, only to sprint in the end in a rapid pace, disallowing voters to fully appreciate positions of the eventual primary winner. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. McLean. Again, and finishing your testimony with us. Does anybody in the room have any questions for Mr. McLean? Representative Prudhomme O'Brien.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I previously asked this, but I don't think you heard. And first I want to say it's great that you're joining us. It's always great to have folks from Derry, and I appreciate your experience. It's very interesting to me. How do you feel about an August date on the state primary? Do you think that would achieve some of your same goals?
I mean, I think June would give it more time for the summer months. I'm really focused on the voter here. I think with respect to the voter, that the giving them time to get to know the primary winners, especially during the summer months when people do have leisure time and they do have the cookouts and they do have more leisure discussions and knowing who the primary winners are at that point is going to help the voters to communicate about what the issues are so they can make a wise decision. So would August be better than September? Yes, but I really believe that June, I'd like to give it the summer months.
Thank you. Further questions from committee members in the room or
Thank you, Representative O'Brien.
on video? I'm not seeing any. Mr. McLean, thank you very much for joining us again. I am not.
Thank you.
If there are any other attendees who would like to speak to this bill, please raise your hand. I'm not seeing any, so I am going to close the public hearing on HB 98, and we will be moving to HB 537. 537 is relative to the date of the state primary. And the primary sponsor will be speaking to us. That would be our own clerk, Representative Wells, who will join us. And Representative Wells, if you want to hand me your pack of notes, I will be happy to take over the duties while you join us and introduce the bill. Representative Wells, I think we talked about it. We're going to use you as our practice person. That if you're introducing a bill, you're going to go down to the chair in the middle of the room and sit at that table. She's looking at me quite nervously right now. But if you want to go down and sit in that chair and welcome to the world of technology, you're going to put your back to me and you're going to face the camera. There you go. Welcome, Representative Wells. Thank you for sponsoring the bill, and welcome to the Election Law Committee.
Excuse me, Representative Wells, I'm sorry for interrupting, but I think you'll need to move one of the microphones to the table with you.
Move this one. There's one of the.
Yeah,
This one. Yeah.
that one seems to work. Yeah.
Does this mic work?
Yeah.
I had to come and get the copies of the bills.
Thank you, Representative Gary. Okay, so just general information, the primary date is set as being the second Tuesday in September, and it can be as early as the 7th and as late as the 14th. The general election is always the first Tuesday after the first Monday. 8 to 10 years ago, the Federal Justice Department passed a law to the states. The UOCAVA ballots, in order to meet the federal 45-day requirements, ballots must be mailed the same week as the primary. For citizens overseas, these ballots not only need to be printed, but be put in the mail or sent out by email, depending on how a person requests it, 45 days before the November general election. In 2010, the state had a situation of being short on time. The Secretary of State's office looked ahead and said this short time period would happen again. It usually happens every 10 years, but this next time will be in 2032. There would not be a whole week backing up to the 45 days to get these UOCAVA ballots mailed out. For an example, the primary is on a Tuesday. They need a Wednesday and Thursday to count, Friday for recounts, sometimes on a Saturday too. Then the state needs to print mail the UOCAVA ballots out the same week. The state counts ballots by first separating the counties, alphabetizing the counties, then tally the 8 county races. Ballots generally go out on that Saturday. So the Secretary of State's office suggests the following. Keep the law as written, but in the event to meet the 45-day federal requirement of the UOCAVA ballots to be mailed out the same week as the primary date should be moved back 1 week earlier. The New Hampshire state primary has always been in September since 1910. Should not change this. Respectfully submitted, Natalie Wells, Representative Natalie Wells.
Thank you, Representative. Does anybody have any questions for Natalie? Representative Terosian.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for taking the question. So that's the Jew bill would rest the issue of encourage two bills with respect to making sure 40 days.
Right.
Representative Sweeney. I'm sorry, Representative Ross.
Did the Secretary of State's office ask you to hop on this bill? Yes.
Representative Wells, the question was?
Sorry? The answer was yes.
Oh, I didn't hear the answer, sorry. Does anybody else have any questions? Thank you, Representative Wells.
Representative Bergeron has his hand up. I'm sorry.
Bergeron, I see your hand, thank you.
Thank you. Representative Wells, just a quick question. Why do you even need an exception? Why don't you just have a bill that says the state primary election will be held on the first Tuesday in September so that it's consistent every year?
I will note that Deputy Scanlon is asking to speak on this bill.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for Representative Wells? Representative O'Brien.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Is there a concern that a lack of a pattern will be confusing? I find patterns of dates to be, very important, and perhaps that's something that Mr. Scanlon addressed.
Exactly.
There is a way the count back is, but I'm going to leave that to Deputy Scanlon.
Thank you. Thank you, Representative Wells. Any Deputy Scanlon, you have been promoted to a panelist. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I'm David Scanlon, Deputy Secretary of State, here in support of this bill, and would like to thank Representative Wells for being a sponsor. This bill, I would consider housekeeping. Our statute calls for the state primary to be on the second Tuesday in September. And in most years or most election cycles, that provides us a 10-day window from the date of the primary within which to certify the vote, have an opportunity for candidates to request recounts, conduct those recounts, and prepare the ballots either physically or electronically so that we can meet the 45-day deadline that occurs Saturday at midnight, 10 days later. There are situations every so many years, it's not frequent, but it does occur, where we lose a week in that window of time between the primary and the general election. And what this bill does is simply allows us to maintain that 10-day window to get the job done, as opposed to having 3 or 4 days after the election to make it happen by creating a formula that allows us to move the primary 1 week earlier in September. That's all the bill does. It's like I said, it's housekeeping. It just allows us the opportunity to get the job done. Doesn't move the date of the primary at all beyond that. And with that, I would be happy to try and answer questions.
Questions? Representative Prudhomme O'Brien, I was waiting for you.
Thank you. Is there a reason why you didn't just simply make the date the first Tuesday in September every year?
It's just keeping with tradition of the second Tuesday in September. It's something that we have been able to do. To do anything beyond that, I think is a policy decision of the legislature. And that's reflected in the bills that you heard prior to this one.
Representative Terosian.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Deputy, for taking my question. In the rare occasion that this happens, and it's happened in the past, have we been in violation? Days, or has that been a problem? Both in?
this has only happened once in the past, and that one time was also the first year that the 45-day deadline was a federal requirement. And we were able to meet that deadline at the time. I believe we had to get creative in doing that by sending out absentee ballots where the voter would write in the names of the candidates that they wanted to support. Certainly that was not ideal. It did meet the technical requirements. So we were not in violation, but that's the only time that we were faced with that situation. It may have been 2010. I'll have to go back and look. But we do know that this situation or that situation will occur again in the future, even though it may be 10 years from now.
Thank you. Follow up, Representative DeRozan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Deputy. If either one of the last two bills we heard would have passed, then that would take care of the issue, and this bill would not be required.
I'm sorry, Madam Chair, I did not hear that question.
I'll speak a little louder. If either of the last two bills that we just heard would have passed, they would take care of this issue that this bill tends to address. So that in that case, if either one of those passing, this bill would not be needed. Correct?
That's correct. I mean, if you pass one of the other two bills that were heard before this one, this bill would not be needed.
Further questions from committee members in the room? Further questions from committee members attending online? If there's anybody else in attendance? I am seeing a hand with your hand up. And I am having problems switching back over. Representative Merriman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to note that the sound quality out of the committee room is marginal and often inaudible. Last week it was perfect, but something must have changed. Just wanted to register that. So I'm sorry, I could just barely hear you, for instance, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Pam. This is problematic. We have an 11 o'clock hearing. It is 11 o'clock. We're going to start that public hearing on time, but I am perhaps that our testimony on that will not be the entire half hour, and maybe we can have somebody from tech support down here. I think in the first instance, the microphones are a problem, and I'm hearing a little echo even in the room as we sit here, and I have for a bit. So I think something else has changed. Is anybody else hearing a slight echo? Yes, I'm seeing some not, so I'm not completely.
I will call Scott Kelly and he'll be there soon.
Okay, but we do have another bill to take up. I am closing the hearing on HB 537, and I am opening the hearing on HB 222. This is a bill relative to political party access to a list of absentee ballots. We have attendees in for this, and Representative Alexander will be introducing it. And if someone can promote him to a panelist and want him to unmute, that would be terrific. Representative Alexander is in attendance. If someone could look into the panelist, that would be great.
Just promoted him.
Representative Alexander, you are with us. If you unmute, welcome. This is HB 223.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Joe Alexander. I'm a representative from Hillsborough District 6, which is the town of Goffstown. I'm here to present HB 223, which is relative to the political party access to the list of absentee ballot requests. So I believe this is a straightforward bill that just codifies the current practice in state law. Currently, only candidates for statewide office can request a list of absentee ballot requests. These statewide candidates can request the list and then designate their respective political party as their agent, and the party can pay for the subscription. By removing the middleman from the process, this would allow parties themselves to have access to absentee ballot requests via of subscription without having to get a sign off from a statewide candidate. I believe this simplifies the current process and law and ensures that a political party without an incumbent statewide election official up on the ballot in a particular election cycle can still get absentee ballot subscription without having to be named the agent of a primary campaign. So I believe this just this is a pretty straightforward bill, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Questions from committee members in the room? Representative McDonald.
Thank you. Good morning, Representative Alexander. Currently, New Hampshire, I believe, has only 2 legal political parties, that at least 4% of the vote as statewide candidates in previous elections. Would it be the only legal political parties that could obtain this checklist, or would the third party group potentially be able to?
Could you hear that, Representative Alexander?
I'm struggling to hear, Madam Chair.
The question was, there are currently 2 legal political parties in the state of New Hampshire. Would any other entity be able to obtain a list?
I believe any current statewide candidate can obtain the list. But if there is as far as I know, if there's a candidate that is a statewide candidate for office, they're allowed to obtain the list. So it doesn't matter what party or what primary they're running in or general election.
Follow up.
But under this bill, would it allow a third party candidate?
I believe it would.
Thank you.
Questions from committee members? Representative Bergeron.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Just a very simple question. When the candidates ask for absentee ballot lists, they're provided the address of the voters who've requested absentee ballots. Your legislation doesn't ask for that. It's part of, public information on the checklist. I'm just wondering why you don't want the address.
That's a great question, and I welcome the committee if they would like to add that information onto the bill. I believe the sponsors would certainly be okay with that.
All right, thank you.
I can use some clarification of that.
Representative Berry.
The bill asks for the voter ID number, and most major parties have databases of voters already, which obviously include their voter ID number. So yes, it would probably be smart to include the bill, but it is in a backwards way already included.
Thank you. Further questions from committee members? I'm not seeing any. Thank you, Representative Alexander.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Deputy Scanlon is in attendance and would like to speak to this bill. And if he's going to speak, somebody else is going to do it. Thank you. Deputy Scanlon, welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. For the record, I'm David Scanlon, Deputy Secretary of State. Not taking a position on this bill because, these are decisions that the legislature should make, but I just wanted to let the committee know that any candidate can go to any town clerk in their elective district and request the absentee ballot list of voters that have requested an absentee ballot, or a person bearing a notarized letter representing the candidate can obtain the list. In the case of a statewide candidate, that individual or their representative with a notarized letter can request a subscription from the Secretary of State's office to obtain the statewide absentee voter list. And the information that would be provided is that information that is in House Bill 223. The key there is the voter ID number. If the candidate has that number, then they can match it up to all the information that is on the statewide centralized voter data based checklist that they can also obtain for a fee. The subscription fee is $2,000 for that candidate. So what this bill does is extends the ability to obtain the statewide list, it looks like, to the political parties. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions? Questions from members of the committee in the room? Questions from committee members online? Not seeing or hearing any. Thank you for that information, Deputy Scanlon. Is there anyone else who would like to speak in regards to HB 223 relating to the ability of voters, relating to obtaining lists of absentee ballot requests? I'm seeing no further testimony, so I'm going to close the hearing on HB 223. Our next hearing starts at 11:30 on HB 505. Tech support is here. We're going to try and get our technical issues. The committee room will be going on mute, and see everybody at 11:30. Thank you. Representative Terosian, if you mute him, Secretary, you can
Feeding text has been a problem.
Hi, Ken, can you hear me?
Sorry, I was muted myself. Yes, I can hear you.
Can you hear me here?
I can hear you.
How about right here?
Yeah, maybe maybe say a longer sentence, because I think sometimes it kind of cuts out over a little time.
Okay, I'm just sliding down here at this table. Does that sound as good?
That sounds nice and clear, yes.
How about right here in this corner? This is where,
Well, it cut out. If you said right here in this corner, and then if you said anything after that, I'm not sure I did hear it.
yeah, how about sitting right here in this left-hand corner? You hear me fine here.
Yeah, I heard that whole sentence.
And how about the chair's microphones?
That's clearest and loudest of all. That sounds great.
Did I?
Now, see, Representative Griffin, I don't know, just there you sort of cut out. I don't know if it's moving your head or what might be causing that.
Microphones into the chairs. Because they're,
So the different, last week we only had the 3 microphones. This is the difference, right?
it is, well, you have more, you have 1, 2.
We have 3, which is what we had last week. Because I remember being surprised that 3 were going to pick everything up.
Yeah, so we added the mics for the chair because mics are most clear. That's. So each chair has a microphone, they control, they can.
Is it possible that that microphone is causing some feedback with other microphones? If it's better?
No, it shouldn't be causing any.
Okay.
Have you been getting feedback?
There has been a little echoing here for the last 20 minutes or so, I think.
Nope.
Nodded their head when I said, I'm hearing a little echo. Does anybody else?
Anna, do you hear an echo from outside the room?
Did I not? I'm not sure that I did. I mean, the sound was definitely not great. Whether I heard an echo, I don't know. But Scott, where you were talking just there at that corner, that left-hand corner of the table, it was definitely garbled.
Okay.
And Representative Griffin is not 100% clear all the time. You were when you were at her mic, but I don't know.
That was a fairly brief little, can you hear me though? So
Exactly.
So if it's going on for any prolonged period, you're having problems with it.
Well, just what you said there, I think you really need to never turn your head, but it's hard for me to see if you are turning your head. Just there, you sounded fine. But a little while ago, you were not, you were garbled. And it does seem as though it could be the mics interfering with each other.
The mixer should take all care of that. How about,
Well, what about if you just take this away and we try to do, can you hear from the other mics?
you can, these are the clearest. Like if you talk into this one, they can hear it.
Yeah, but I should. All right, but I'm not hearing committee members and they actually do more talking, doing their hearing than I do.
None of these mics working. We just.
This one seemed to be working. It was the ones on this side of the room that we were having problems with.
Yeah. Right now, I'm hearing Representative Griffin very well, and I'm not hearing Scott well at all.
So it's gotten away from the mic. So over
I'm
here.
just reporting. Go ahead and say something more.
I'm okay over here.
If maybe just keep talking.
I'm sitting over here on the left side of the room.
Yeah, that sounds fine. That sounds fine.
But there are 2 microphones over here now. So what happens when you go over to where Representative Barry is? or where Natalie was testifying, because they had a problem with Natalie.
Well, she didn't have a microphone when she first sat down at the testifying table. But then when she did have one, she was fine.
So this mic, so you have 3 mics on this side.
But it was interesting, when somebody moved the mic and spoke, you could really hear the mic picking it up. But when someone was moving the other mic and moving it, there was no,
So one mic is stronger than the other.
yes.
Yeah, I'm getting comments that the mic on your side of the room needs to be turned up, Scott. I'm getting helpful comments from others out in the listening world.
How about now, Pam? Now that
Oh,
I
that sounds much better.
turn up the game just a little bit.
That definitely sounds better.
How about in this corner here?
That's nice and clear. Yes.
Scott, when I joined this, it asked me if I want to join with computer audio, and I've been, as far as I know, I've been turned off the whole time. Is there any way to join without computer?
Review and say those Zoom meetings, like-
They said that, like, feedback, or speaker was definitely- Yeah, but if they said it was a watch you, all right, well, hopefully I just logged on again, so.
Have a couple people.
Yeah.
Now, if it matters, that conversation on the left-hand side of the room is very garbled. I mean,
Oh, over here. Yeah. Because there's no mic. Right. We're talking about representative. No, that's Representative Greeley. Okay. He could not hear me.
They said it was his microphone that was on or something.
Oh, yeah.
now, Representative Griffin, I have made you a co-host, and I don't know if you have regained your,
Back on, so we'll see how it goes. It seems to be responding much better.
good, good.
See what happens. No, there's a lifetime to everything today that was not happening last week. I wonder if the system, just with the more committee meetings going on, is having more problems. Because we were the only ones last week, and I think it was.
That's, I think that one. Luke's not plugged in before, the one that was over here, or? No, they're not plugged in. Yeah, it's just a problem with the system.
Scott, when you're done with that, I need you to take a look at what thing here. You need to keep.
Were you talking to me?
thing and then you don't.
I can, but that side of the room is not good. It's, I mean, I guess maybe because of the other conversation, but it's very garbled and I'm getting the word that you're not loud on the mic in the center table.
30 seconds. 30 seconds. Basically.
It's difficult with the other conversation. I can hear you, but I'm hearing that garbled conversation behind you, so it's kind of confusing.
Would you mind not speaking for a few minutes? They're trying to see if they can hear Scott.
It's not great. It's light and a little garbled.
Which side of the room I guess is now also probably.
We have an extension.
That is just water never changed, right? Oh, yeah. That's my story.
That's all we hear now. Could be Jim, could be Rob.
I'm picking up other conversations more than you. You're faint.
I'm hoping so. That's the case.
Pam, I have a clear, with all the reference to Mr. Rupp, I have a clear voice. Do you want me to walk around and just keep talking? Because I'm more than happy to do that. So,
Okay, I mean, you were just cutting out at the mic. I don't know if it's because you were moving.
so I'm over here in the conference room checking the sound, and I'm trying to see if I'm coming through consistently. And I'm standing here by the mic in front of Clerk Wells. I'm going to move over.
I hear you. It's not really loud and clear, but I hear.
To the mic by Representative Terosian to see if you can pick me up here. I don't know.
That's much louder, much clearer. That's much better, that mic.
Representative gentlemen, if you can stop talking for a minute, we're doing microphone checks, and if I come down here, if Representative Barry is speaking, would I be able to hear him?
This is softer than the Terosian mic. This seems to be lower, but I can hear you.
So, but you could hear me.
Yes, I can hear you.
If I come across, if I'm sitting here, can you hear me at all? If I'm sitting here,
That is not good. Sitting at the testifying table is not a good sound.
Oh, that's for the rest of the applicants. This is problematic. But here, Representative, if you want to ask a question, can you hear what Representative?
You are cutting out. You are not good there on the left, my left-hand side of the room.
As I move up here, if Representative Mooney moved up here, would you be able to hear her?
Yes, that's an excellent spot right there. That's a good sound.
Two mics going, and of course the chair's mic is up there. So once again, we're back to this room. This side seems to be a little clearer, and the other side is having problems. So
Yeah, the Terosian mic was good, and the Prudhomme O'Brien maybe mic was good, but the Barry mic was not so good.
all right, and I'm over here, and then now I'm probably being picked up by the chair's mic. And can you hear me now in front of the chair's mic?
Yes, I can.
Sure. All right, the next, I might wait. Pam, Representative Abramson said he would be a few minutes late for the 11:30, and he was going to introduce it. But I don't actually see him sign up. I told him he needed to sign up. Representative Abramson for 505. He's the sponsor, and the other sponsor isn't signed up either.
So who do I talk to for my little name tag?
Huh?
Who do I talk to get my name?
I know you should have a name tag around you.
So they throw mine away for 2 years, 4 years?
No, they shouldn't. Representative Cody, they took yours out, right?
No, that's the paper.
They didn't find your old one?
No, who do I ask?
We're aware of the nameplate issue. It's just that it hasn't been a top priority, but it will be done.
They probably have the old ones and some sealed off.
Right, they're all, we do definitely keep them from previous years, but as you can imagine, there are a lot of them, and on the list.
Good, very good. Very busy, good.
Oh, I guess it's.
Oh, God.
And then we'll go back to mute. Thank you, everybody. It is 11:30 and we are scheduled to begin 5:05. We will be delaying this approximately 5 minutes. The prime sponsor of the legislation who was going to introduce it contacted me to say he had to introduce another bill. So we will give it another few minutes. I will note if anybody's listening to this that I do not have the co-sponsor signed up to speak on this bill. So if no one shows up, I'm not quite sure where the committee is going to go with this bill. Thank you. And if you want to mute us, we'll process. The House Committee on Election Law has reconvened. This is an 11:30 hearing. We're starting a little late. Unfortunately, Representative Abramson has obviously not been able to clear his schedule from his testimony before another committee. I welcome Representative Terosian for introducing Bill 505. Welcome, Representative Terosian.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And, good morning to members of the Election Law Committee. For the record, my name is Peter Trojan. I'm representative County District 14, which is the town of Monticello. I'm here to introduce House Bill 505. The prime sponsor is not here, so don't take any questions.
Thank you very much, Representative Terosian. In attendance, we have individuals who have signed up to speak on this bill. And I'm going to proceed to do that. Former Representative Dan McGuire has signed up to speak on this bill and been promoted to a panelist. Welcome, Mr. McGuire.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Dan McGuire and I'm from Epsom. And if I had known you were going to put me on video and not just audio, I would have put on a tie today. I apologize. I'm happy to kick this off because I was a member of the House from 2011 to 2016, and I was the first prime sponsor of a bill very similar to this during that time. So I'm very familiar with the issue, and I can answer questions that you may have. So this is one of the what I assume is the very few completely nonpartisan bills that your committee will deal with. This is not does not give any particular advantage to any particular party. It's an idea that just improves the experience of the voters, and in particular, it makes sure that every vote counts. That every voter's what they want to have happen is expressed and is becomes part of the count. The bill is very simple. It doesn't require any new, the structure of the ballot doesn't change, the machines don't change, the counting procedure doesn't change. If you look at the bill, it's extremely short. The only thing that changes slightly are the instructions that are written on the ballot. So to give you an example of what the bill would do, and the other thing is it really doesn't make a difference in any kind of head-to-head race. If you have a race for governor and there are two people running, this makes no difference. There's no change in the effect of this bill. It makes a slight difference in races where multiple people are running, sometimes for multiple seats, or it could simply be multiple people running for one seat. So to illustrate what the bill does, let me talk about the district that I represented when I was in the House. And that's a district of two towns, Epsom and Pittsfield, and had two reps for those two towns. Currently, this is Representative Allard and Close are your representatives from this particular district. And so typically there would be in the general election, there would be four candidates, two Democrats and two Republicans for these two seats. And let's consider the ways that voters might vote for these four candidates. So first of all, someone can skip this election altogether, right? They could leave it blank. We don't have any problem now doing that. More typically, people vote for two of the candidates. Often they vote for the same party, but not always. Sometimes they might pick one from each party. So this bill doesn't change that in any way. What about if someone votes for a single candidate, right? So they pick one out of the four. This bill doesn't change that in any way. And this is not that uncommon. I mean, we even have a name for that. We call that bullet voting. And it's currently perfectly acceptable. It would be acceptable. Nothing would change if this bill passed. Similarly, let's suppose somebody, for whatever reason they might have, they voted for all 4 candidates. Well, currently we don't count that, right? We throw that out and say that's an overvote. You can't do that. But supposing we did count it, which would happen under this bill, it wouldn't affect the outcome in any way, right? Because a vote, there are 4 candidates and a vote for all 4, everybody's vote goes up by 1, it doesn't change the outcome. So the only thing that would change is, let's suppose that someone voted for 3 of the 4 candidates. Now, currently, that gets thrown out, right? We call that an overvote, and that person's vote is not counted. But it's clear to anyone looking at that vote and looking at the ballot what that person is trying to express, right? That person who voted for 3 out of 4 says, I don't want number 4, right? I'm voting against number 4. I dislike number 4, and I don't care between the other 3. And so what this bill would do is say, let's count that. That's a perfectly valid sentiment. A voter can easily think, this is a person I don't like, and want to vote against them, and doesn't want to express an opinion among others, right? There's nothing theoretically wrong with counting that vote. There's nothing practically wrong with counting that vote. It's exactly the same thing as a bullet vote. And I wish I had a good name for it, like bullet vote. I don't know what you would call it. I'm not that great at marketing, but just, voting against one person would essentially is exactly the same as voting for one person in such a circumstance, right? And there's no reason why we shouldn't count that, and we shouldn't listen to what that voter wants to say. And so that's what this bill does. This bill says we should count that kind of vote, right? It eliminates overvoting, and it listens to every voter. Now, I actually, and I recommend this really to all of you on the election committee, is to participate in recounts and look at ballots, because you learn a lot about voting simply observing ballots. And I once observed a situation that was similar to what I just described, and that was I was watching a recount for state rep in Hudson Pelham. This is a huge district. I think there are 13 reps in that district, and they had a close election, and so it was being recounted. And we came upon a ballot where someone had voted for every single Democrat on the ballot. They had voted straight party line, all the Democrats. But when it came to state rep, they had voted for all the Democratic state reps, but they had also voted for one Republican, right? And so what happened was that ballot was thrown out when it was absolutely clear to every single person looking at that ballot, what did this voter, what was in this voter's mind? Because clearly this voter was a Democrat and wanted Democrats to win. But in the case of state rep, they were maybe friends with or neighbors with or knew one particular Republican candidate, and they liked that person too. This perfectly human sentiment. It's important, and why not let them express that? So that's what this procedure, this bill, House Bill 505, would do. I highly recommend that you vote it off to pass, and I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you. Questions from committee members? Thank you. Representative McDonald.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and good morning, Mr. McGuire. I've sat in on a number of recounts over the years, as you've indicated you have, and in multi-candidate fields, the tabulation is always a challenge, as you're going through that. Do you foresee additional tabulating problems, counting problems initially with this proposed system? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, and thank you very much, Representative McDonald, and welcome to the House, you might say, because I know this is your first term. So I don't think so. The answer is no. I mean, first of all, the same machine that counts votes currently and would simply be programmed not to throw out overvotes, right? It would just count every mark on the ballot. And so the machine is no different. Many places use machines. In cases where they don't use machines and they just do tick marks like you do in a recount, they would simply basically read off all the names and make the tick marks in the appropriate places. And so I don't foresee any real difference.
Thank you.
Thank you. Questions from committee members in the room? Representative Terosian.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for taking my question. So, I heard your testimony that if, you vote for 3 of the 4, you're obviously making it known that that one candidate you didn't vote for is you're voting against that person. But under the present system, you can still do that. You just can't vote for as many people, but you can still vote, in essence, not for that candidate. So I'm a little, I don't quite completely follow what the goal is here. To me, this almost seems a little bit like ranked voting. I know you don't get a chance, it's not a runoff, but so maybe you can clarify a little bit more for me how that would make a difference between whether you voted for 2 people when you were voting against somebody or you voted for 3 to vote against them.
Thank you very much for the question, Representative. So let's take your particular example. I want to vote against number 4, and I have no preference between 1, 2, and 3. In the current system, it's up to me to try to guess which ones of 1, 2, and 3 will be the most popular and vote for those 2, right? So I have to guess that the voters are going to like 1 and 2 better than they like 3, right? So that I can make my vote work, basically. So the voter is required to somehow have a handle on the election and make that choice. And I don't know how a voter necessarily knows those kind of things. And so the voter who wants to vote against 4 can't just express that. They have to vote against 4 and against somebody else, right? And the most practical thing that they should do is figure out which somebody else is least likely to win and vote against them, because they're trying to make sure 4 doesn't win, but they're going to have to do the same thing to 3. And so why should the voter be required to do that? The voter who wants to bullet vote one person doesn't have to do that. They can easily express what they want to express. But the voter who wants to sort of bullet against one person can't express that. And I think it's a perfectly natural thing that a voter might want to do. I've done it myself sometimes. So that's it. Your current system requires the voter to kind of be politically aware in a way that doesn't make sense.
Thank you. Follow up, Representative Terosian.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, follow-up is, so if I hear it correctly, it sort of gives the voter a chance to second guess. In essence, he's voting more just against that person than he is necessarily trying to vote for the 2 best people out of the 4. Am I reading that correctly?
Yes, thank you for the question. So again, I'm postulating we have a voter who really hates one particular candidate, would not want to see that person win. But among the other 3, they're okay. They don't have a strong preference, right? And so you might say, well, just pick 2, find your 2 favorites. You may not have a big preference, but why not just vote for them? But if by doing that, you allow candidate number 4, because you didn't vote for 3, candidate 4 beat number 3, well, now you're unhappy. You see what I mean? So it's makes it tough for that voter to express what they want to express and have it count. And there's no reason for it. I mean, I guess I don't see an objection to this procedure.
Thank you.
Other than it's not the way we've always done it. That's the only thing we're trying to overcome here.
Thank you, Mr. McGuire. Further questions from committee members in the room? Questions from committee members? I see a panelist has a hand up. Representative Hamlet, do you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. So Representative McGuire, does this system guarantee that the winner will get over 50% of the vote? So I'm trying to understand the difference between this system and ranked choice voting. Whereas in ranked choice voting, I think it guarantees that the winner will get, you know, a majority or over 50% of the vote. So does this system assure that the winner would get over 50%?
Well, thank you for the question, Representative. And in my little example of two people running for 4 seats, of course, that's true. But in let's take something more bigger, like the presidential primary. You've got 24 people running for one position.
Right.
You see, in that case, the answer is no, right? Because the winner is frequently somebody with 30% of the vote or something like that. So the only reason that ranked choice voting creates what you called somebody got 50% is because it starts to throw away votes, right? Somebody liked somebody who got a very small vote. Well, they change that vote into a different preference, right? So they keep throwing away candidates until somebody gets 50%. But this just simply counts. And if you took something like the presidential primary, it may be that the winner gets 50%, but not necessarily.
Thank you. Further questions from committee members for Mr. McGuire? I'm not seeing any. Thank you very much for your testimony. Is Representative Abramson outside the hall there? Representative Rosen?
Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Then welcome. The bill has been introduced and Representative McGuire spoke to it. If you could sit in that chair, that's where we're having people speak.
Do you want me to grab a microphone?
No.
Members of the committee, my name is Representative Max Abramson, representing Hampton Falls, and Seabrook, introducing House Bill 515, which is called approval voting, but it's just kind of it's a big $5 word for we don't throw out the ballot. I come from Seabrook, and I help folks learn to vote the first time, and I just sat down at a table just like this at Seabrook Town Hall, and the woman only voted for Trump. And she voted for Trump, but she also marked the write-in and was trying to write his name in, and she had never done it before, didn't understand the process. So she was having a little bit of a difficult time, and I thought, you know, what's going to happen if this goes to the recount? The presidential election was even close in New Hampshire, but what if you had a legislative race where people didn't quite understand the process? We do have quite a few voters, older voters and younger voters, who are voting for the first time. And when you cast a ballot as a citizen, the way I see it is you own your ballot. Your ballot belongs to you, and you have an absolute legal, moral, and constitutional right to mark your preferences the way you want. So many of the local races that we have in Seabrook are 5 candidates running for 2 planning boards, or 4 candidates running for 1 selectman spot, or we have multi-member districts. One race, I come from the flotilla. We actually have multi-member flotillas. So we looked at instant runoff voting and ranked choice voting and some of the other options, and those do run into problems when you have multi-member districts, and especially if you have going for 2 seats or 3 seats, and you have odd or uncontrolled numbers of candidates. And if somebody does, I've heard this before, if somebody does just want to vote against an incumbent selectman and vote for the other 3 candidates, they should have the right to do so. But most of what approval voting does is just say, if somebody marks their ballot twice for 3 candidates, right now we count. Under approval voting, if they mark three candidates for 2 seats, right now, that gets thrown out. The whole ballot gets thrown out on recounts throughout the entire ballot, and that voter's been disenfranchised. Under approval voting, we don't do that. We count every single vote. One of the concerns that was brought up in the majority report last time we brought this up, this bill's been brought up twice before. The concern was we might have people getting elected who didn't have more than 51% of the vote, but that's actually a bigger problem right now. Most of the members of the House of Representatives right now didn't win a majority, especially if you come from multi-member districts. Some actually have less than 40% of the vote, but they were going for 3 seats, and they got 39%, and the next candidate now got 36%. So they're their seat. The approval voting is much more useful for multi-member districts, 4-way selection rates. Complicated bond issues is something that needs to be resolved somehow. So serving on municipal county, and in the town of Hampton Falls, the school board put on, I believe, it was a $5 million bond for the school district. And by citizens petition, some people said that was enough, so they wanted to do the full $7.5 million. Because both of them were on the ballot at the same time. They both failed. Neither got 60% that they needed to pass, and they had to come back and do it again the subsequent year, and ended up costing more money than it was like a year in getting renovations. Approval voting is the only alternative voting method that's actually simpler. Doesn't require any new software or hardware. We continue using the same scanning devices. It's easier to figure out what the intent of the voter was compared to all the other methods, even the current method. In St. Louis and Fargo have had very good success with approval voting. Some members of this committee who were here a couple of years ago said they wanted to see how other towns roll it out and make sure that the process was working. I understand the logic behind that. You want, if there's going to be a potential lawsuit, recount, or somebody disputes something, you want somebody else to spend money on litigation first, and that's already come on. And finally, approval voting is very useful if you have independent candidates and third party candidates. I think that it's a foregone conclusion that the Libertarian Party is going to be on the ballot again. They have been almost every year for 25 or 30 years, maybe from I'll certainly be on. There's a possibility that the Constitution Party, the Patriot Party, and other parties could be on. Those voters who you could have a Constitution Party candidate in your race and you get a 3-way race. Those voters who know you maybe want to make a statement that they'd like to vote for you also. If they're voting for the third party candidate, approval voting says they have the right to vote for as many as they want, or even to write someone in to go as and because it's their ballot, it's not my ballot. Our responsibility is to protect their constitutional rights, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, your right to address a jury of your peers and explain your case. And in the same way, you have a fundamental right to mark your ballot how you choose. Our job is just to tally the votes as accurately as we can and make sure, as the Constitution requires and its representative democracy requires, that whoever the top vote getter is, whoever actually accumulates the most votes. Will this lead to tactical voting? I would say the opposite. I see a lot more tactical voting. I talk to a lot more voters who vote either against the Republicans or against the Democrats or against the candidate they don't like. I've heard from quite a few Republicans who voted, they really didn't like Biden or Harris. They voted for them because they disliked Trump and vice versa. So first past the post that we have right now always leads to tactical voting. And something like 80% of voters now voting against the other candidate. Approval voting allows you to vote for the candidates you want, even if you're also voting against the candidate.
Thank you, Representative. Questions for Representative from committee members in the room? I'm seeing none. questions from committee members attending online? I'm not seeing any hands. Thank you very much, Mr. Representative Everson. Also signed up to speak on this bill today is Aaron Hanlon.
Hi, thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
So I'm Aaron Hamlin. I'm speaking on my own behalf, but I'm also the executive director for the Center for Election Science. We've been around for 10 years. We've also been responsible with working with communities across the United States in implementing approval voting. We worked with
So,
two
Mr. If you can clarify for me, are you speaking for yourself or for an organization?
I'm speaking on my own behalf.
Okay, so why don't you proceed with the testimony on your behalf? Thank you.
Okay. So approval voting has been implemented in 2 cities, most recently St. Louis, Missouri, and prior to that, Fargo, North Dakota. In Fargo, North Dakota, it was actually used in a 2-seat election. In prior years, Fargo had seen elections where the winner would be lucky to get 30%. In this past election, the 2 winners in that election got 55% approval for one and 51% approval for the other. So one of the benefits of approval voting is it allows winners to lead with a mandate, whereas previously they may have experienced heavy vote splitting. Also, approval voting really is what it's doing is it's removing an artificial limitation of requiring voters to choose one candidate or to choose as many candidates as there are seats to be filled. And there's really no rational reason for doing that and limiting a voter's expression. All it's really doing is encouraging polarization in a zero-sum game where it's saying choose this party or choose the other party rather than allowing voters to compromise, which would encourage more consensus winners, which is what approval voting does, leading towards those more consensus winners. Also across New Hampshire, we're seeing a number of third parties run. This is not new, seen it for a long time. Also seen it in the presidential race. Approval voting addresses and solves the spoiler problem by allowing voters to choose as many candidates as they want. So if they want to choose you too, in addition to say a third party or a libertarian candidate, they can do that. There's no issue with that. It's a very fair way of doing that by not taking away their expression, while at the same time making sure that they're not forced to split the vote between you and a third party candidate. Also, it's important for primaries. So when you have a crowded field in primaries in particular, what can happen is you can have a number of candidates in the middle who split their vote. And as a consequence, you can have more extreme candidates win as a result. Approval voting allows voters to choose multiple of those candidates, so those candidates in the center don't split their vote, and we have a much more representative nominee for that party. And overall, we're talking about a voting method that is virtually free. Just has some education component, which the organization I've been with, they've been great about working with cities throughout the US after they've implemented approval voting and doing the education campaign. And it's something that is incredibly simple. We're really just talking about the language difference within the ballot itself. But I've looked at this issue for, this is my profession. So I'm also happy to take any questions and address any concerns that you have. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Does anybody in the room have any questions for Mr. Hamlin? Representative Bruno O'Brien.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Hamlin. Are you aware of any increase in voter turnout since this method has been employed in Fargo and in St. Louis?
The issue of voter turnout is something that is challenging to be able to determine. So like if we're trying to look at like the difference between two groups, like one pre-approval voting and then post-approval voting, we've seen one election so far. So it's difficult to extrapolate from that individual election, particularly given that that election took place during the middle of a pandemic. So there's not really a good comparison group there.
Thank you. Any further questions for Mr. Hamlin from people in the room? How about from committee members who are attending online or remotely? I'm not seeing any hands. So thank you very much, Mr. Hamlin, for your participation today. Also up to speak on this bill is Alvin C. And I can't get back to my attendee list, and I know I've seen him there. So if Pam or Representative McDonald could promote him to a panelist. Mr. C, you were with us. Thank you. Good morning or good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you. This is Alvin C. And sorry I don't have the video up, but you should be able to hear me now, I hope.
We can hear you. Thank you.
Okay. I'm Alvin C. I'm from Loudon, New Hampshire, and I am in support of House Bill 505. This is a concept, as was explained before, that's also known as approval voting. And I like the idea that it allows the voter to better express their opinion of all the candidates for any given office. The plurality voting that we currently have is essentially only works right when there's only two candidates. Then you're just choosing one or the other. As soon as there's more than two candidates, then the approval the plurality voting starts to break down. So with the being able to do this concept as presented in this bill, essentially all we're doing is ignoring overvotes, or the term, and it makes it easier to program the AccuVote machines because they don't have to program in the number for that constitutes overvote. I think the approval voting will show its best in the presidential primary, where we usually have a field of about 30 candidates in either party. Even this past presidential primary on the Republican side, there were 17 candidates in spite of the strength of Donald Trump. So this still works. And if you think of a presidential primary, there's often several candidates that you can say, hey, these are guys that I think might be who I want for president. And it's not unusual to find that right after our primary, or sometimes even before our primary, that your favorite candidate is suddenly suspended his campaign. So at least at this case, you would have been able to vote for several of them. If there were several that you thought were okay, you would have supported one of those candidates. And also in the presidential primary, which is unique in one way in that we're not directly deciding who's going to be on the November ballot. What we're doing is determining the allocation of delegates to the party's national conventions. And also, we're providing useful information to all the other states that have yet to do their primaries. One thing about the presidential primary, I should note that the text for this bill should be amended to include the same provisions to be applied to RSA 656:31, which deals with presidential primaries separate from all the statewide races. This type of approval voting also can work in the nonpartisan municipal elections, in that the approval voting can handle full ballots. So it actually eliminates the need to have a primary election to reduce the number of votes down to 2 candidates for a one-person office, or to twice the number of candidates as there are seats to be filled. Just by virtue of that, the municipalities can save some much needed money just by not having to have that primary election. I did send an email to the committee members, and I noted on there on line 5 and 6 where the where the new text says vote for one or more, add an additional sentence, blank will be elected, so that the voters know how many people are going to be elected for that, even though they may be voting for 3 and there's only 2 going to be elected. That also, on line 21, after the phrase of your choice or choices, add the sentence, you may vote for more than the number of candidates to be elected. That's under the instructions on the ballot, just to be a little bit more clear. And as I noted, and those 2 changes need to also be applied to RSA 656:31 for the presidential primary, which was missed in the original bill text. A small, actually non-germane but helpful amendment would be in the middle of line 5, delete the words small but for the text size when it's describing the sentence on the ballot that tells how many people to vote for. I've noticed that I often hear people mention that we have an aging population in New Hampshire, and having small type is not a good thing to have there. That also applies to the end of line 31. And I would like to comment to a question that Representative Hamblett had asked about the guaranteeing that there would be a candidate would receive 50%. This does not guarantee that candidate will receive 50%. You could have 2 people receive 49%, but it also can happen that you can have more than one candidate have greater than 50%. And that was mentioned in that question was ranked choice voting does not necessarily guarantee greater than 50%. It's looking for that, but once you get through all the rankings, if somebody still doesn't have greater than 50%, it's the highest vote wins. And also on the just to remember on our the Constitution, our state Constitution for the offices of Senate, Governor, and Executive Council specifically now use the word plurality for the election. That was approved in 1912 Constitutional Convention, although they left the wording in the sentences now rather poorly structured. I would think that it might be worth having a legal opinion that this change in the voting would not affect that constitutional provisions. And that's the provisions are on Part 2nd of the Constitution, Article 33 and 34 for the Senate, Article 42 for the governor, and Article 61 for the council. I'd be happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Thank you very much, Mr. C. Does anybody in the committee room have any questions for Mr. C? I'm not seeing any. Does anybody attending remotely from the committee have any questions for Mr. C? I'm not seeing anybody, and I'm not seeing anybody with their hand up. Thank you very much, Mr. C, for testifying this week on this bill. Also signed up to speak on this bill tonight is Mr. Geschman. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. He has been promoted to a panelist and hopefully has been unmuted. Mr. Geschman, are you with us? Mr. Geschman, are you with us? Pam, can you find him? Mr. Geschman, can you raise your hand?
I think he just came in.
There he is. Mr. Geschman, welcome. If you can unmute yourself, you are with us. We are talking about
Yes, ma'am.
505. Welcome.
Thank you very much, ma'am. And I am unmuted. And Madam Chairman, election law committee members, for the record, my name is Ted McGetchman, and I'm here representing myself. I am very much in favor of House Bill 505. And I only want to point out 2 points that might not be intuitively obvious to the committee members. The first is that it is only when you allow voters to freely support all the candidates they want that you can actually tell the level of support all the candidates have. And you don't currently have that today. The election committee members, the representatives, what the voters really want. They are fully capable of designing a political platform that aligns completely with what the voters desire. But because of the election system that you currently have, voters will split votes between like-minded candidates, leaving the possibility that a less desired candidate or a less desired platform could win the election. The second point I wanted to bring up is the idea, I'd like you to consider a single seat election, but with multiple candidates, more than 2 at least. Currently today, a voter only is allowed to provide 1 point of input. Which candidate do they want? The system does not know what they think of any of those other candidates. It could be 3, it could be 4. It has no idea. That lack of knowledge goes into determining who wins the election. In contrast, in an HB 505 type election, what would happen is that even if a voter only selected 1 candidate, because they could choose the other ones, they are sending a deliberate message that they do not want to support those other candidates. So in other words, every voter has an input on every single candidate. And because all of that information is used to determine the winner, the result of every 505 election will give you the most approved of candidate every single time. It'll give you the most approved of lists of candidates every single time. More information into the system, more power for the voter, you get a better result. HB 505 is a simple and easy to understand modification to the election rules. However, it provides a lot more power to the voters. It ensures the most approved of candidates win. And it provides to you, the current elected officials, greater and more robust political support. 505 is a powerful and smart initiative. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony this morning. Does anybody in the committee room have any questions for the witness? Does anybody online have any questions? Representative Prudhomme O'Brien, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Dyshman, are you a New Hampshire resident?
No, ma'am, I am not a New Hampshire, I'm sorry, Madam Chair. I am not a New Hampshire resident, but I am a citizen of the United States, and I am a recently retired Navy commander. And in my last tour, I served over in the EUCOM headquarters, working directly with our allies and our partners overseas. And I can tell you from personal experience how easy it is for our adversaries to exploit the cracks within our political parties and between our political parties. If all of the states were to enact the legislation that you are currently considering, we would have a much more safer country and more robust against these malign influences of these adversary countries who would like nothing more than to see us dissolve from an uncivil war into a hot civil war.
Further questions? Did Mr. Geschman, perhaps I'm confused. The representative asked if you were a resident of New Hampshire. You said you were not. What state are you a resident of?
I am a resident of the state of Nevada, Madam Chairman.
Yeah, thank you. Any other questions for the witness? I'm not seeing any. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. Also signed up to speak on this bill is Mr. Cape. Mr. Cape, welcome to the Election Law Committee this morning. Welcome for your testimony on HB 505.
Thank you so much for having me and allowing me to speak. I am a New Hampshire resident. I went to school in Whitefield, New Hampshire, and I attend Dartmouth College. So I would like to say that approval voting is a marginal improvement within our system with marginal costs. But I think what's not been quite so discussed here is the fact that it doesn't have an ordinal component, that you are not able to see the difference between candidates as far as rankings go. So while they've said that if you do not approve of a specific candidate, you might approve of all the others and vote such a way, and that can be useful. But in other voting systems, including ranked choice voting, that by giving an ordinal account ranking of some sort, you can more fully see the spectrum of support that candidates have in comparison to approval voting. It's also worth noting that when discussing approval voting, there's a high level, albeit not as high as the plurality vote that we currently have, both within the block system and not within the block system, of strategic voting, where if two candidates who I might approve of are neck and neck with each other, if I'm being strategic, I will not vote for the second place, like the neck and neck person. I'll go with my favorite choice, not showing my approval for the other person so that I can strategically vote to get my preferred candidate ahead while I might have approved of both. And different systems can account for that. That is not accounted for within an approval voting system. Approval voting, as was said earlier, does not ensure a majority. It does not really give an extra claim to doing too much to get a majority. It's showing the percent of voters who approve of a candidate, which can be useful information, but it's not a percentage of the vote, and it does not give good information on preference, on ranking, as opposed to a binary of I can live with them or I can't live with them. It's distinct from ranked choice voting, and I can talk more about ranked choice voting if people are interested in the differences. And I'll be happy to take questions if anyone has any. Thank you.
Thank you for appearing before us again this week. Members of the committee present in the room, any questions? Members of the committee online, any questions for Mr. King? I'm not seeing any. Thank you for joining us. Is there anybody else in attendance who would like to speak in regards to this bill? Raise your hand. Mr. Cobb, and I'm going to ask, since we have gone over the time and you did not sign up to speak, you have signed up but not supposedly speaking. I'm going to ask that you keep your testimony to 3 minutes. You have, welcome. Mr. Cobb, are you with us? Mr. Cobb? If somebody could, I'm having a hard time elevating Mr. Cobb for some reason. If somebody could elevate him, he's on the attendees. There we go. Mr. Cobb, you are with us. If you could unmute. HB 505, please. Mr. Cobb, if you could unmute.
Oh, okay, how about now?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Cobb. Please, 3 minutes.
Okay, yeah, good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Stephen Cobb, and I've already submitted written testimony into the record, but I thought I should summarize a couple key points. Also, I could address the points about IRV, the ranked choice voting that were raised recently, if you have questions about that. So my testimony took the form of an op-ed that was published yesterday in the Union Leader. And my op-ed was in response to one by Kelly Ayotte and Ovid LaMontagne back in September. Now, the two of them were calling for post-primary party unity, which is a very nice thing. And it's nice to hear coming from them together. But party unity is not a magical thing that happens automatically. It has prerequisites. And one of those prerequisites is that the primary be a valid and fair one that the voters have confidence in. And if you'll recall, in 2010, Kelly Ayotte beat LaMontagne by a mere 1 percentage point, 38 to 37%. There were two other candidates in the primary, Bill Binney and Jim Bender, who got far more than the margin between Ayotte and LaMontagne. So that was a classic case of vote splitting. And I know very well because I was on the Jim Bender campaign, and all of our efforts did nothing but shift the outcome from probably from LaMontagne to Ayotte, is how we expect. So you could think this is a rare occurrence. And I don't know how often vote splitting happens to change elections, but it happened again to Kelly Ayotte in 2016 with the spoiler Aaron Day. But quite often, vote splitting is lurking in the background. It's the threat of it. So it's discouraging candidates from entering the race, from tossing their hat in the ring. And now that's a sad thing. But fortunately, there is a simple solution. This voting method that we're discussing today, approval voting, it has minimal cost and huge impact. It was dismissed recently by a speaker as being a only marginal improvement. Actually, it would be a dramatic improvement. If you look at other performance of the various alternative voting methods, approval voting has by far the biggest impact for the cost. Other alternative methods exist that are actually better, and in the sense that they produce better results, but they have a far greater cost in complexity. That's voter instructions, error rates, tabulation, recounting, the ability to count the votes centrally or locally rather than centrally. So I'll just add this: if approval voting is not, does not distinguish preferences enough for you, you can upgrade it to what's called score voting, where you rate the candidates not just 0 or 1, but 0 through 5, if necessary. But that's not what we're discussing today. Today, we're discussing approval voting. So in terms of bang for the buck, approval voting is a no-brainer, and I highly encourage you to support it. And I'll take any questions you might have, even though we're close to lunchtime.
Any questions from committee members in the room? Any questions from committee members attending remote? Representative Truman-Howard.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Cobb. Are you a current New Hampshire resident?
No, I left New Hampshire a few years ago. I currently live in Berlin, Germany, the other Berlin.
Thank you. Any further questions from committee members in the room or attending remotely? I'm not seeing any. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
If there's anybody else in the attendees who wants to speak in regards to 505, if they could please raise their hand. I'm not seeing anything, so I'm going to close the public hearing on 505 and open the public hearing on House Bill 514. 514 is relative to ballot column rotation, and we get to have our esteemed clerk join us at the table again to introduce House Bill 514. Thank you.
This bill is also requested.
Excuse me, I'm sorry to interrupt Representative Wells. I think you're going to need to get a microphone.
Thank you, Representative Roseanne.
Okay. Okay, so this bill is a request of the Secretary of State's office again. This office, the office feels that the formula in RSA 656:5 is just too complex. And they're going to propose an amendment. The idea is to put each party columns posted an equal number of times as a fairness issue. Every 10 years after redistricting takes place, the Secretary of State's formula for each column rotation tries to have each column an elected office in different positions. The Secretary of State's office feels by removing the complex sentence in RSA 656:5 and adding in an amendment, this will create a simpler method.
Thank you. Representative Wells, will you be taking any questions?
I think I'm going to defer to Deputy Scanlon.
Thank you. Deputy Scanlon has joined us as a panelist. Welcome, Deputy Scanlon.
Hi, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I'm David Scanlon, Deputy Secretary of State, here in support of House Bill 514, and want to thank Representative Wells for sponsoring the legislation. Every 10 years after the decennial census, we are charged with recalculating the party column rotation that appears on our general election ballots. There was a court ruling well over a decade ago after some litigation about candidate rotations on the ballot and party column rotations, where the judge ruled that as a matter of fairness, our ballot had to contain rotation schemes to make sure that each candidate, in the case of the candidate listings or party columns on the ballot, had to be rotated so that they would appear in the first, second, third, fourth, if necessary, positions as equal a number of times as is reasonably possible. So there was a piece of legislation that was filed that kind of directed the Secretary of State's office on how to do that. Before I get there, I just want to read Roman numeral 2 from RSA 656:5, which says the position of party columns shall be rotated on the ballots used so that each party column shall appear thereon to the extent practicable an approximately equal number of times in the first, last, and each intermediate column position across the state without requiring more than one unique column, order, or ballot format for each town, ward, or unincorporated place. So that means we don't break ballots up within individual town or ward boundaries. The ballot is the same no matter who votes on it in a town or a city ward. If we were just talking about the party column rotations, Republican, Democrat, other, or Libertarian or other third party, if there was one, it would be easy enough. But the language in Roman numeral 3 of that same statute goes on to say that each generic column rotation plan shall be based on a reasonably balanced rotation of party columns within and across all non-flotarial state representative districts, those being the smallest representative districts to which each voting place is apportioned pursuant to Part 1, Article 2 of the Constitution. And then it says consideration shall also be given to reasonably minimize any obvious, substantial, and avoidable imbalances in party column rotation within Senate districts. So essentially what that means is that in the process of determining the party column rotations, you don't want to create a situation where in a Senate district, for example, all or most of the towns in that Senate district end up being in rotation column number 1. The statute says that we have to sort that out so that we can spread those towns out as evenly as possible as well. And so then we get to the sentence that is in question in this piece of legislation. The average deviation from equal rotation for the first party column position measured across the state as a whole and based on population, according to the last decennial federal census, shall be as close to 0% as is practicable, but in no event greater than 1%. As it turned out, in the last 10 years, we got much closer to 0% than we did to 1%, but it was a huge effort. It took several weeks to put in place. I will admit that I don't understand the formula on how we got there. And there's probably only 1 or 2 people that worked on that maybe could explain it to you in an understandable way. So what we would like to do is come up with a formula that is a little bit more transparent and easy to understand. We think that that is achieved by removing that sentence and giving us the flexibility to comply with the intent of the statute in as reasonable, a deviation as is possible. If the committee feels that that sentence still needs to be in there, then we would simply suggest that you change the 1% to 2 or 3% to give us that added flexibility. And with that, Madam Chair, I'd be happy to try and answer any questions. I will add that it's not critical that this legislation get passed this session, but it does need to be addressed before next session at the same time that redistricting is taking place.
Thank you. Questions from committee members in the room? Representative McDonald.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Good morning again, Deputy Secretary of State Scanlon. I had conferred with the House Legal Counsel on this because of the controversy over the years of rotation, party columns and ballots. And I think you had made a reference to a court decision. Was it Akins versus Secretary of State? Was that the one you were referring to? Or?
Yes, that would be the lawsuit that ended up with a judge ruling that we had to rotate order of candidates and party columns.
If we were to delete this sentence, do you have any constitutional concerns about going to a greater deviation level?
We don't. The statute was actually passed by Cliff Below, who was one of the plaintiffs in the Akins case. And there may have been an additional case that followed up after the Akins case that required this. And so this was designed by a state senator according to the way that he felt the rotations should take place. I believe that what we are proposing is still in compliance with constitutional requirements and would be consistent with what the court ordered.
Thank you very much.
Further questions from committee members in the room?
Sorry, I'm having trouble hearing again.
Yeah, Pam, and if Tech is listening, there has been a definite echo in this room from, I believe, the sound system somehow. And the testimony from the witnesses has been muted compared, or certainly a lower decibel, and everybody's agreeing it's not just my hearing, than it was prior to the break. So there is definitely still something going on with the sound system in the room.
All right, I'm hearing you and writing things down.
Thank you. I'm sorry, Deputy Scanlon, you were saying?
I was just saying, I can hear you very clearly now, Madam Chair.
Okay. All right, questions from anybody else? I'm not seeing any hands up. I'm not seeing anybody. All right, thank you. Is there anybody in attendance who's make any comments on this bill? I don't have anybody signed up to speak on it. All right, thank you. All right, with that, I'm going to close the public hearing on HB 514. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody, for participating. I believe that concludes our business for today, committee members. You should have received a legal notice, and it is in the